Our next guest really, in some ways, changed the world. She certainly changed people's attitude towards sexuality. She was among those who led what is at least the modern version of the sexual revolution. Susie Bright, she was the woman who first published On Our Backs, which was a sex-positive magazine for women, and eventually a collection of erotica for women called Herotica.
That's right.
And her latest book is called Big Sex, Little Death. And boy, talk about becoming mainstream. You were very much sort of an edgy character, and many things that you talk about now, that you talked about then, have really become mainstream. Are you surprised by that at all?
I know. In some ways, you wonder, are you supposed to come out and say, my work is done? But I can't say that.
That'll be the day.
I will be glad. I would love to be, put out of business. But unfortunately, I think public policy and a lot of the confines that we live with today is really dictated by a very conservative, fanatically religious ideology. And I often feel the tension in the culture between left and right when it comes to sex is just it seems like it's been at the breaking point for my entire life.
Well, now, let's go. The original, and it's true to that extent, when you first started doing magazines and books, people were shocked.
Oh, sure, they were. They would say, I think it's because, I'm so pale and freckles and, imagine me much younger. And they would say, what's a nice girl like you doing an filthy magazine like this?
Well, so let me ask you a question. What was a nice girl like you doing with a filthy magazine like that? How did that happen?
Oh, I think even, before I ever kissed anyone or held hands, I had a very sheltered life, very little bookworm kind of girl. But I had this passion about how things should be fair, and when I remember reading stories about little girls should do this and little boys should do that, and I would go, but that's not true. And even when they said boys, and they would teach you about puberty, and they would say to the young men, you can expect to be having sexual feelings and dreams as you get older. Girls, no, is there a bottle of, of hair dye or Tampax for you people? There was nothing about, do we have sexual feelings or daydreams?
Well, of course not.
And I remember even in junior high, just that is not true. And after all, I do, and I don't think I'm that strange.
Well, but you certainly were out there for a long time. When you first started doing this in the 80s, it was still pretty shocking for much of the world to have this idea of approaching women's sexuality.
I actually saw it shift. I was one of the first feminist vibrator store clerks. It's a very unusual occupation. I worked in this...
Is that on your resume?
Yes, it is. And I worked in this store that was about the size of these sofas put together. And when I first began, the only people who came in would say, something's wrong with me. My doctor sent me here. I'm crippled. It was this complete disgrace. And I remember my boss had said, I don't care if you say anything, if you sell anything all day, just talk to people. Do what you can. And she was such a great philanthropist. This was Joni Blank.
Yeah.
And then I remember the day this woman came in and she said, hey, I want a magic wand. And she was in a good mood. She wasn't acting like she was crippled or anything.
Yeah.
I said, well, how do you even know about this? She goes, oh, all the gals at the switchboard have this. She worked back at AT&T when there was a switchboard, And I was like, something has changed. She's not, a radical. She doesn't have a mohawk, but she's changing.
Susie Bright, the book is called Big Sex, Little Death. It's a memoir.
It's an adventure story.
Quite an adventure. Thank you for joining us, and happy Mother's Day.
Oh, thank you. I'm so pleased.
Marty, back to you.